I've been a Turo host since 2017, and over the years, with over 2,000 trips, I've learned a ton of valuable lessons. Unfortunately, many of which came from losing money or making giant mistakes. But the reality is, a lot of the mistakes that I've learned from over the years could have been easily avoided. And that's exactly what I want to talk about in this video. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down 6 things that I wish I knew whenever I started Turo in 2017. These are things that I know with 100% certainty would have saved me a ton of money in the long run. They would have allowed for me to streamline and scale my business quicker, and they would have just made me a more successful host altogether. So let's get started. Now, I do want to note that if you're familiar with my videos, you probably know that I'm a big proponent of buying low-end economy cars. That is my bread and butter business model. That is definitely what I found the most success in. And though all of these tactics that I'll be talking about in this video definitely apply to the low-end budget economy vehicle business model, they can also be applied to any types of cars you buy, whether you go low-end economy like me, whether you go high-end luxury, whether you go like middle class, whatever the case is. These things that I'm going to be talking about today are applicable for every single type of Turo host out there, regardless of where you live, what types of cars you rent, and what type of business you're operating. Now, if you guys could do me a huge favor, and if you could hit the like button and hit the notification bell for the YouTube algorithm, I would greatly appreciate it. This helps my channel grow because it helps that YouTube know that you guys are enjoying my content. Additionally, I do have a car sharing masterclass. This is a course that teaches you guys how to start a car sharing fleet with the same business model I use. If you use the code LESSONS, you can get $25 off that course. So number 1 is to keep track of your expenses as soon as you start running your Turo fleet. This is something that I know I made a mistake with, and it's something that I oftentimes see with new Turo hosts as well. Keeping track of your expenses and truly knowing how much your fleet is making is something that is incredibly important. So keeping track of things like your depreciation, how much you're spending on fuel, how much you're spending on oil, how much you're spending on tires, parts, labor, all of these things are so important. And the reason why I think tracking them as early as possible is important is really 2 different reasons. Number 1, to make sure that Turo is worth it for you. You want to make sure that you're making enough money to justify this side hustle. And if you're operating your business correctly, then the answer to that should be yes. But you won't know the answer for sure unless you start running your numbers. And number 2 is because implementing these processes once you have a lot of cars, it only gets harder. Like developing a P&L system, developing an expense tracking system, all of this is much easier whenever you only have 1 car. So developing these processes early will really make scaling your business that much easier in the future. Number 2, and this is probably the biggest mistake that I know I personally made, and it's definitely one of the ones that I didn't put an emphasis on until really recently, and that is developing relationships with shops and people in the automotive industry as soon as possible.
You know someone like that?
Let's just say I know a guy who knows a guy who knows another guy.
For those of you who don't know, I run my Turo fleet with my fiance, HP. He actually quit his job last summer to concentrate on our fleet full time. And as a result, he's taken over a lot of the heavy lifting with our fleet. The reason why I mention this is because I am extremely introverted. I am somebody who will not converse with anybody if I'm at a shop. I will not go out of my way to talk to people, to ask for help, to build relationships. It's something that I've always had an issue with, and it's something that doesn't come naturally to me at all. But HP is like polar opposites. He's extremely friendly. He makes friends with everybody he meets. He's extremely extroverted. And as a result, he's truly built a lot of great relationships with people in the automotive industry. And I have learned over the last 6 to 8 months how much value that can add to your Turo business. Over the years, as I was the one solely managing our fleet, we would take our cars to get some work done. We'd take our cars to a shop, and we would have to pay full price for these types of services. But with HP taking the lead on these things and building relationships with people in the industry, you would not believe how many services we either get free or heavily discounted. For example, recently we had to take one of our cars to get an AC service done. This service typically costs about $200, and we got it done for 100% free just because we knew the owners of the shop. This is something that I really feel like I was missing out on whenever I was the one handling the fleet, and not building these relationships earlier is definitely something that I regret, because having relationships with people in the automotive industry industry is invaluable whenever it comes to growing and managing your Turo fleet successfully. Number 3 is to develop a process and then absolutely stick to that process to a T. This is something that is going to be very important as your Turo fleet continues to grow. Now, like I mentioned earlier in this video, my process and my business model is the low-end economy model. I rent out low-end economy cars. I do all of my key exchanges remote, meaning it is a rule of mine to never meet a guest in person. I don't do deliveries. I don't do custom drop-off locations. I don't do any of that stuff. I have laid out a series of parameters that I follow with my Turo fleet, and I never, ever veer from that. This has really helped me streamline my business because it's taken a lot of the questions out of the equation altogether. Let me give you an example. This happens almost on a weekly basis, if not every few days, where a guest will message me and they'll say, hey, how much would it cost for me to do a delivery? Or how much would it cost to have you pick up this car instead of me bringing it back to your location? If I was somebody that didn't have a set of guidelines that I follow with my business, well, then it would be tempted to do these types of one-off things. I would then research, okay, where is this guest? How long would it take me to pick up the car? How am I going to go pick up the car? How am I going to get back to my location? There would be a lot of questions that would need to be answered and a lot of internal dilemma about whether or not I should take this guest up on their offer. This is something that is not only a time suck, it's an energy suck, it's a space suck in your head. This is something that is simply a waste of time. And spoiler alert, 9 times out of 10, it's just not worth it. By developing a clear set of guidelines that you follow with your business, it takes a lot of questions off of your plate, and this allows for you to concentrate on the things that really matter. Nowadays, if a guest asks me to deliver the car, the answer is just a flat out no. I don't make exceptions to that rule. I simply do not deliver cars. If they want me to deliver it, then they need to cancel the trip and book with somebody else. The 4th tip that I have for you is to stick to what you know. This is something that is really important. Whenever it comes to Turo, there are a lot of different directions that you can go into. You could rent out a variety of different cars. You could rent out electric cars. You could rent out exotic cars, high-end luxury, low-end economy. The list is truly endless. But I feel as though whenever you go this route and whenever you experiment with a bunch of different things, it makes it very difficult to figure out what works best. I think whenever you really niche down and stick to what you know, not only are you able to find better cars to buy, you're able to buy them at a better price, you're able to run your business more efficiently, and you're able to cut costs down as well. If I had 20 different makes and models that I owned, it would be very difficult to run my business efficiently because I wouldn't be able to be an expert at each one of those cars. But by sticking to low-end economy specifically with a sparkle of other cars here and there, it's really allowed for HP and I to run our Turo business insanely efficiently with a high profit margin. That's not to say that you shouldn't experiment with other cars, because as you guys know, I've done that. I recently got a Maserati Ghibli, which didn't turn out that great, but I did experiment with other makes and models. I think that it's a good idea to experiment, that way you can evolve, but I think doing so cautiously while really concentrating on what you know, that is definitely where you'll find the most success. Number 5 on this list is probably the one that I personally most resonate with, and that is to not chase the shiny object, or don't give in to shiny object syndrome. Now, what shiny object syndrome is it's basically the mindset of thinking that the new thing is the best thing. It's basically the idea that the grass is always greener on the other side. And this is something that I personally struggle with in business. I will see what other people are doing and I'll just want to try that. Not necessarily because I think that what they're doing is better, but because what I think they're doing is cool and innovative and unique, and I want to see if I can be successful at that as well. But I think that this is a really difficult trap that you can potentially fall into that will end up really hurting you long term. I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say is there will always be more than one way to be successful at one business, whether it be Turo, whether it be YouTube, whether it be millions of other businesses out there. But the reality is that you can't always be chasing these different methods and these different strategies. And instead, like I mentioned a few moments ago, I would encourage you to stick to what you know and hone in on your specific business strategy and really see that strategy through. That truly is the best way to be successful at Turo. Otherwise, you're going to be jumping all over the place and you're not really going to find a ton of success with anything. Last but certainly not least on this list is to not rent out any car that you care about. Like seriously, don't rent out a car that you like on Turo. The unfortunate reality is that your car is going to get abused. It's going to happen. It's absolutely inevitable. I have never owned a car on Turo that hasn't been abused, and I've owned a ton. I feel like a lot of times with new hosts, there is like this emotional connection with cars, especially if a car has a higher value, especially if it's a car that you at one point drove for personal use. This is something that is very common, and to be honest, I don't blame it at all. I had a personal connection to my very first car that I had on Turo, which was my Jeep Wrangler, and it did hurt a little bit whenever I was seeing it come back damaged. The same thing happened with the Maserati Ghibli I owned. It recently was wrecked, and that was something that was tough to witness because I really enjoyed that car. But the reality is, if you want to be successful on Turo, especially if you want to scale a Turo business, you just have to take the emotion out of the equation, which I know can sometimes be hard because cars are expensive, and a lot of times we do have personal attachments to our car. So if you have a car that you own, that you're thinking about renting it on Turo, and you do have that emotional attachment that you just don't think you can shake, then I would probably avoid Turo altogether with that vehicle. Drive the car for personal use, or better yet, buy a Yaris to justify the payment of that car, but don't rent out that exact car, because renting out cars you love is a recipe for disaster. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that this gave you some valuable insight into some of the things and some of the lessons that you can learn in your Turo fleet as soon as possible, thus helping you run your Turo business more efficiently and, more importantly, more profitably. If you guys have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.